What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Davidson podcast, where I get to interview amazing people and help share their wisdom with the world. Let me know your takeaways and feel free to connect with the guest. I'm aiming to build a community around coaching, self-development, leadership, where people are not afraid to be their most authentic versions of themselves. You can find us on video by searching the Davidson podcast on YouTube. Welcome and enjoy the ride. Hey everyone, I'm excited to introduce to you one of our large enterprise account executives at LinkedIn Learning. His name is Brian Mauro, and he's just an amazing role model for many of us. Like, a lot of us look up to him, and he's always so kind and compassionate and just always like willing to listen and hear people out. And yeah, I'm really excited to share with the world your tips and advice and your wisdom from all of your success.
Yeah, happy to be here, Davidson. Thanks. It's an honor to be here and looking forward to it. Thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you ended up being the number one rep, right? Like in learning.
Well, this past year, I did reach 100% by the skin of my teeth the last day of the fiscal year.
Man.
And that was certainly an interesting experience, especially going through the last quarter with COVID and scaling back budgets and really going through something that I don't think any of us has ever experienced before. And I even went, sold through 9/11, and this was, a much different experience. Um, but, like many things in life, and what I realized selling through 9/11 and the recession is just to kind of, open your mind to learn as much as you can through the experience and know that something similar will happen down the road. And if you can learn as much from each and every challenge um, and hurdle, right, you can apply the lessons learned down the road. I think I learned a lot during the recession and during 9/11 to kind of get me through some of the challenging times of what we're still experiencing with the pandemic. But hats off to our colleague Mimi, who was the MVP of the business and highest, I think, percentage of quota. So I think for sure she was our top rep.
Right, but from a like it's purely like numbers wise, you technically brought in like the most like business, right? Is that how that works?
I think so. We, as an 84, we have the highest quotas, and um, so being, I think I was the top 84 for this fiscal year. Then technically that would, I think I did bring in the most revenue. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like you're very humble. I think one of the cool things in learning is like everyone's super humble. I know like when I was in other sales orgs, I was paired up with the number one rep at like a Martech company, and I would say he was like pretty confident, like very confident in himself.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a good guy. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I learned so much from him, but I feel like at LinkedIn, it seems like, at least in the learning side, like we hire like pretty humble people. Like despite you guys being like always crushing your numbers and all that good stuff.
Well, I'll say this. Part of the reason I moved to LinkedIn was to continue to grow and learn and be challenged, and being in an environment with such talent across the board, it's inspiring. It's humbling because I know if I don't work hard and continue to learn and grow, there's so much talent behind me and to my side that I'm replaceable. So that continues to inspire me, and I also know that any success that I have is a result of collaboration with so many cross functional partners and partners in learning as well, and so much teamwork, um, from marketing to you know, product development and the best courses in the world to, you know, legal and just everybody. So it while my name may be on the board, you know, occasionally for some of the success, you know, that from a sales standpoint, it's definitely a team behind me, and I continue to learn from you and all my peers, no matter what role or, you know, level they're at. Everybody brings just great ideas and um, practices to the table. Yeah, so I know that, you know, I've got to continue to learn, and also, um, you know, I'm super grateful to be amongst such great talent.
Yeah, I definitely hear the gratitude in your voice and your sharing. It's you're very grounded. Like that's definitely something like I learned from you from day one, right? You're very like you're very like you have good composure. Like I feel like it'd be hard for you to like be all over the place, you know, like you seem very centered, you know. So I'm curious, like, is it because of like a meditation practice? Like, I guess what are your practices around like kind of staying even keeled? Because it does seem like you are very like composed all the time.
Yeah, and I'm not always composed. You know, I certainly stress about numbers and where I'm at, and but I think a lot of it goes back to being an athlete growing up, and I was a soccer goalie, so there's a lot of pressure on being a soccer goalie. You're pretty much either the hero or the goat, you know, for every game.
Yeah.
And many times where I failed, and then other times that I succeeded. And I think what I learned is not to get too down on the failures, but to learn from them,
Hmm.
and not to get too high on the success, because you could fail, you know, tomorrow again. And so I think that provided me kind of a framework when I entered my professional career,
Hmm.
and going through, you know, adversity and challenging um, times as an athlete, and overcoming them, um, and realizing some of my deficiencies or areas of improvement, and having to work hard to fix those. I tried to take all that from what I learned in kind of the athletic world to apply in the professional world. Yeah, and so I think, you know, much like being a goalie, where if I wasn't working hard enough or learning, continuing to grow, I could be replaced. You know, I kind of feel that way in corporate America as well, with all the talent behind me. So I'm certainly humbled. I never overconfident, and from a meditation standpoint, you know, we've seen each other on LinkedIn meditation over the past few months, and so I've incorporated that into my practice. I started incorporating that really after I joined LinkedIn, and so grateful for the wellness program that we have here and the opportunity to learn and leverage the meditation classes that they continually offer, and just kind of coming into a new environment, working from home for 7 straight years at Skillsoft, and then coming here and having to adapt to the corporate office and a senior role and all that. I kind of recognized that I needed an opportunity to, or a tool rather, to kind of calm down and settle my nerves. And meditation was a good option. I just started then, and then really put into practice during the pandemic, um, where we were, you know, working from home, and I was going through selling of my house and just some additional stress.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and you know we I know we discussed earlier about like just being a parent and especially you know being a parent during the pandemic, right? Even harder. Um, What are some of your favorite things about like being a parent? Because I do think like so many of us, especially people who are like super career oriented, sometimes like people think, oh, like is being a parent gonna slow me down, right? Is it, I'm not gonna have as much time. Like I know some people think that way, right?
I think, yeah, I do think some people think that way. Luckily, I have, a father that um, focused, on family. That was his main priority. And he traded commodities. He traded gold and silver in the World Trade Center, actually. And the market closed around 2:30, 2:40 p.m. in the afternoon. So he had a small company, he had a partner, and then he had folks working for him that would take care of the paperwork, and he would usually leave right at 2:30, 2:40. Got to every one of my games, my sister's games,
Wow.
and he lost his parents at a very young age, and his siblings, him and his sister and brother, were split up, and they had to go to separate families, and so they lived apart. So the value of family was always front and center of how we grew up, and has always been front and center for my wife and I raising our kids. And I've always tried to focus on family number one, and actually the pandemic has kind of just increased that importance that families first, and given us even more time to spend with them, which has been kind of a silver lining, throughout this, um, and it allowed us to kind of get to know each other even more, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Much like learning in the corporate world, I continue to try to learn from even them. At 14 years old and 11 years old, they teach me a lot, um, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's kind of something unexpected that's come out of it.
Yeah, I feel like you have a lot of humility, right? For someone who's has had so much success that, and you have had such a successful career so far and so much more to go. But I genuinely hear that you are learning from, your kids, right? So that's inspiring to see that, like, no matter how old you are, like you're always learning, you're always open to, because I do think sometimes like we get to a certain age and we're kind of just like, like I've experienced life, like I know what it's like, but it seems
Mm-hmm.
genuinely like always open to like new worldviews and almost like forgetting some of the things that you've learned in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being in the learning space for majority of my career now, 20 years, it's, as you sell learning, right, you kind of have to drink the Kool-Aid too, right? Or you kind of sell yourself on the importance of learning, and just reflecting back on how much life has changed, and the learning industry has changed. And if you're not evolving yourself, then you're going to be left behind. And now more than ever, right, with skill gaps and emerging skills, and um, that we see in each industry, as we sell LinkedIn Learning, and not adapting to technology, and having my kids sometimes teach me, technology, and certainly my colleagues, it's almost reinforces the fact that we have to have that growth mindset, and continue to learn in all aspects of life. And no matter how old you are, or how old they may be, you can learn from anyone at any age. Um, yeah, so my kids have only reinforced that, as they kind of make fun of me sometimes with the lack of knowledge, and TikTok, or other tools, or Venmo. I remember when my team at LinkedIn Learning, we were pitching in for a gift, and they told me to Venmo them, and I had no idea what they were talking about, right? And so they kind of laughed, but they expected it, because that's kind of how I am. I'm kind of the older guy in the group, and then I coach So I took Venmo and I sent them Venmo. I signed it up and I coached both my kids' soccer teams. And now I'm collecting money for like referee fees through Venmo. And I started doing that a couple of years ago, and none of the other parents ever heard of Venmo back then either. So there's an opportunity for me to teach them, which
Yeah.
I thought.
It's interesting, right? Because in the grand scheme of things, like you're not that old, but I guess like LinkedIn is a relatively young company, right? Where it's,
Yes.
the average age is probably a little bit younger than you. So I guess,
I think I heard a couple GSKs ago that the average age was 27,
oh wow.
which I wouldn't be totally surprised.
Huh. That's crazy to think about, right? Because that means like I'm old compared to everyone at LinkedIn.
Well, I realized, I was kind of old when they wanted me to come in and kind of offer experience in L&D space, right, and be kind of that gray beard, where most of the hires for LinkedIn Learning as we're building out the business were internal hires, just leveraging the great talent in other lines of business, rightfully so. Um, and so when I came in, I realized I was a little bit older, but it fuels me to live healthy and try to stay young.
Yeah, it's funny because you're one of those guys that you can't tell like how old you are. Like you can be like super young, but you can also be more mature. Like you're like adaptable where you can be either way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That makes me feel better.
Well, I'm curious. One of the things I know a lot of listeners are either like mid-market account executives or, maybe in their first 5 to 10 years of their sales career. Like, what advice would you give to, um, one, like wanting to get into LinkedIn? Because like I feel like half of my friends are just like, they're just like, I'm just trying to get into LinkedIn, right? So that's like
Yeah.
first advice. So what advice would you give to people who are aspiring to get to LinkedIn? And then after that, like maybe like what's something that you wish you knew like as much earlier in your sales career that you know now?
Ooh, it's really two really good questions. Going back in my sales career, it's funny. There was a lot of cold calling, and what if I could do anything different or maybe change back then is I I probably would have leaned more on, and I did, but more on mentorship and asking for feedback, which I think millennials and probably a large portion of your audience, they do a really good job of that.
Hmm.
Where Generation X, like for some reason, we just weren't, that wasn't part of our DNA, and we kind of shied away from what are our gaps and what can we improve on, and sometimes trying to hide that or ignore that, and then being put in a position where you needed that, um, and then weren't able to leverage it, or use it. So, for example, early on, I didn't want to present, you know, and run presentations, in front of customers or internally, and I just tried to avoid that. And then we're at an internal sales meeting, and we were all asked to deliver a few slides of our corporate deck, and I hadn't even looked at it, and I hadn't rehearsed it, and I got up and just failed, and I couldn't even speak to the slides. So my manager came up and did it for me, and then it was a long ride home. Similar to some rides home when I failed as a goalie, and I realized, all right, I've got to work on my weaknesses, and I can't hide from them anymore. And I need to seek help, and I need to take classes and continue to learn and continue to sharpen my craft. Um, so that's something that, I kind of wish I would have done earlier, but it was a learning experience that um, I took from, and I learned more from failures, I think, than anything else, and so I learned from it, picked myself up, and I think started developing more of a growth mindset, which is why I think I'm at LinkedIn,
Mm,
and took the challenge of leaving a company, Skillsoft, in which I had tremendous success there. I left as a few days after being the number two rep in the company, and people asked me why would you leave, and I
mm,
wanted that challenge. I wanted to continue to grow and sharpen my skills, and
mm.
I felt like I was stale at that point. If that makes sense. Um, and when I saw that there was an opportunity at LinkedIn, I just went all in and went forward. And I don't know if I can offer advice on. I think I was hired because of my experience, and it was a competitive interview process for sure. I think I went in 5 or 7 times.
Wow.
Um, and I don't think I'm the best interviewer because I'm very very honest, and what you see is what you get, and maybe some of the answers aren't what they're looking for, but they're real. I remember a couple of years ago at President's Club, actually, Ryan, came over to me and said, when we asked you how to drive urgency in learning, you said that it's very difficult to drive urgency in learning, and that these sales cycles take 9 to 12 months, and that's not what they wanted to hear. And he apologized for it, Ryan Kaiser, that is, because he said you were right. You know, but yeah, for those that are striving to get to LinkedIn, as you probably have already experienced, some of you, it's a very very competitive company and environment. I think last year 1 million candidates had applied for, I don't know, 1,000 jobs. So if you weren't one of the lucky ones to get through, my advice would be learn from your experience, and every interview that you go on is a stepping stone to your next opportunity, and an opportunity to learn from that unique interview or that unique interview process, and don't view it as a failure. Just learn from it and continue to go after it. Yeah, don't give up, and realize that it's such a competitive company, but continue to go after it.
Yeah, that I like how you tied in. You're able to tie in like the learning aspects, and then I like how you transitioned that. Like that was very smooth, like very seamless. I could see how like
Thank you.
that was awesome.
Yeah, but I always tell my, I coach soccer, I coach girls and boys, and I continue to tell them to play and go into a game and try the things that you need to improve upon. And if you fail, that's what we want, right? It's not about winning or losing, but for your own personal growth, use your left foot, use your weak foot, and if you fall down, that's fine because you're going to learn from it. You're going to get up, and it's going to be better the next time, the next time, the next time. And I truly believe that, whether it's sports or life, you learn from failure, and it's an opportunity to learn. Um, and going through, I don't know if you're at the building resilience workshop during GSK, but he spoke to that as well. Look as failures not as really failures, but as opportunities to grow and opportunities to learn.
You're talking about Kevin Delaney's?
Yes. Oh no, not Delaney. The ex-athlete. I'm trying to remember his name off the top of my head. Who's the whole workshop was about building resiliency. He was, I think, an ex-pitcher.
Oh yeah, his book. Yeah. They gave out his book as I think Leah Smart ran that the first when he
Okay.
yeah during the speaker series. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very profound. I really like his Yeah, he has a good mindset for sure. Like the way he's able to reframe failures.
Yes, absolutely. And breathe. He was talking about breathing too, and kind of applying learning, what you've learned from meditation into stressful environments or stressful moments,
Yeah.
which I think is so helpful. That's something else I wish I learned earlier in my career. Or you're about to enter maybe a big meeting or a big presentation, right? He talked a lot about visualizing, and I used to always visualize going to bed at night before a big game, making some big saves as a goalkeeper. And so when he spoke about visualization and breathing in his workshop, I thought to myself, it's such a great tip for the professional world as well, right? Visualize, getting up in front of a group and presenting and knocking it out of the park, and what you're going to say, and a lot of positive thoughts, and then breathing as well. So all helpful tools.
I like how you shared this story about how you failed, right? Because it's funny because like I can't even imagine that happening. Like the fact that that even happened to you, like I'm like mind blown. Like Brian, like I would never just be able to see that ever, because it just doesn't seem. But to your point, like everyone makes mistakes. Like everyone has these bad, like or these not so great moments, right? That's just like a part of life. And clearly, like you learn from that, right? Like I'm sure that never happened ever again, right?
Well, it's just another reminder that we're all going to make mistakes and we're all going to fail, and when you do, learn from it. Um, and another reminder just to be as prepared as you can, and that was a key takeaway. For me, be prepared at all times, whether it's in athletics or in the professional world, and that's the only way you're going to succeed. And if you still fail after preparation, then you can look yourself in the mirror and say, "Hey, I gave my all." Um, and I just didn't come out on top. So that was certainly, a key lesson to continue to learn, but also continue to prepare yourself as much as possible. And I know that for me, I can't really wing it, So if I go into a meeting, I do need to be prepared and kind of rehearse, before I get there. But other people, they may not have to, but that's something that I've learned along the way as well.
But do you think as good as charismatic as someone is though, but I feel like everyone still needs to prep, right? Like I feel like it's impossible to really like wing it, Like, it doesn't seem like any of like the large enterprise reps would ever like wing something.
It's a balance, I think, for me, where I don't necessarily want to go into maybe a disco call with a set number of specific questions on a list, but I know some people do, and they do a great job.
Hmm.
And it's just my personality of being prepared, maybe with research,
Hmm.
right, on the company and information in my head that I can use to apply based on where the conversation goes, right? So to kind of not force feed the questions, but have enough information and research in my head where I can naturally ask questions during the flow of a conversation based on where the conversation goes. Yeah, so I think you're right. And everybody I think is different, but that's just the way my flow goes.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think if you're too to the script, if you're too stuck to your script, then there's like you're not as present, 100% present as you can be, right? Because you're trying to get through your agenda instead of just being adaptive and truly listening to hear like the pain, right? So I think that probably works for you because like you're able to still listen, but you still know enough that at least like the baseline.
That's a great point. Absolutely, and I still have challenges with kind of effective listening. Whereas earlier in my career, that was certainly a big challenge of mine where I wanted to say what I needed to say and I wasn't listening, right? I wasn't going where the conversation was going or going where the pain was, like you said, or where the um, possible solution is, or the follow-up questions. It was, all right, how do I get what I need prepared out, and I'm not even listening. Yeah. So that's a great point. I still try to improve on that and have that kind of effective listening skills and even take courses to for tips and techniques to to continue to be a better listener for sure in the household and and in the corporate environment.
It,
Yeah.
it's funny. I still use you in a lot of my disco calls, my discovery calls. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is how I use like just as like a story to tell clients. I'm like, what I typically do is I'll look at our top reps, like I'll look on Brian Marl's LinkedIn, see what courses he's taken, all his badges, and then I'll take those courses because I know like, hey, like clearly it's working for the number one rep. Why wouldn't it work for me? So I use
Um,
that like all the time, and it always works. So, oh, that's really smart.
and yeah, I'll do the same thing, right? I mean, if you see 15 people that have liked a course, you're going to gravitate to that course, right? And so will their employees.
Yeah, yeah.
It's natural. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like it was funny. Hey Liz, if you're listening to this, I remember Liz Rice was like offended. She's like, "How come you don't use my name? How come you don't say like, hey, I go on Liz Rice's and look at her LinkedIn learning badges? Why do you have to say Brian?"
Liz will say it how it is, right? There's no holding back from Liz. That's why I love her.
Yeah, yeah, she's awesome.
Her complete self, yeah, and which I think I strive to be as well. So she's the best.
Yeah, and then I like what you said about like you're just real, right? I think that's probably why you've had so much success because like in sales, because I think sales as like overall like context, like most people I mean, I think it depends, right? That's like it's pretty big generalization to say like, oh, salespeople are like, but there's a couple of bad ones that ruin it for like everyone else, right? So the fact that you're super about like your transparency, like you get, what you see is what you get. Like I'm sure that has a lot to do with your success because people just want that like transparency. You're not trying to sell them a bill of goods, like you like it's like you're being honest like hey if this is not the best fit for you like you'll tell them like this is probably not the best fit for you.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I had a conversation just yesterday with a company that is trying to roll out like really a stair stepper with LinkedIn Learning, and they don't think they can afford to roll it out to all of their employees from a budgetary standpoint. And they, much like a lot of organizations, say, well, we'll roll it out to our managers first. And I said, if I can just be transparent with you, and based on my experience of being in the e-learning space now for 12 years, I've seen that approach fail, and I would actually recommend flipping that and offering it to individual contributors first.
Hmm.
That's because they're hungrier for learning. Their appetite for learning is typically higher. Managers probably already have uh, training, that they're taking advantage of, and to help them with their manager leadership skills. And if we look at say the consumer usage, I think that backs it up, right? Where we can talk about the skills that folks are eager to learn. But doing it in it's funny because I was sharing with my wife. I actually think I've had more face to face meetings during quarantine than I did before, right? Because
Huh.
every call, I at least start with my camera on, and so I feel like we can have these transparent, honest conversations, and they can see that we're authentic in what we're saying. Whereas if we're over the phone, then that authenticity may not show right over the phone. But I think it shows better face to face, and now we're having more and more face to faces now that we have Zoom and Teams that we're leveraging on a daily basis.
That- that's an interesting concept you brought up because Brian Mullins told me the same thing when I interviewed him. I think he was like the first person I interviewed from like the learning from like LinkedIn side. And he was like, "Oh, do you want to do video?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do video." He's like, "I used to never do video, but now he's like, now I feel like I do so much video now." So that's interesting. He said
Yeah.
similar. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, it's fascinating, really, because I love face-to-face meetings, and I do miss jumping on a plane once a quarter or a few times a quarter and going meeting them face to face and having dinner and lunch and building that relationship. Um, but I feel like while we can't have that, obviously now that we're in this situation, it has given us the opportunity to meet more face to face
Hmm.
and not feel uncomfortable asking would you like to set up a virtual call. Now it's just natural. Right now it's expected. And I would say that 85 to 90% of the calls I have, they turn their camera on as well, or they see that mine is on and then they'll turn theirs on.
Uh, Interesting. From a macro level, do you think that business there'll be less travel in general, or do you think things will eventually go back to normal and there'll still be like the in-persons and the flying out to client sites and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think companies will cut back for sure
Hmm.
on travel, and it's not, a necessity. I mean, I think there's certain industries that they'll go back to normal, like insurance and financial services. Those where relationships are key.
Hmm.
But um, yeah, I think it's going to be a blend, you know,
Hmm.
for sure, going forward, and maybe you fly someplace for big RFP or
Hmm.
a significant opportunity, but a lot of them are going to be done over VC,
Hmm.
which I think is a good thing. You know.
Yeah, I'm sure our head of green, Go Green, is probably loving it, right? She's probably like, man, we're hitting our goals like really
Yeah,
quick.
totally. Right. It's just such a unique dynamic that's taking place with virtual and we're all working from home. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens going forward. I think we have such a great culture and company environment in New York and all of our offices that we're all eager to get back in some way, whether that's a flexible working environment,
Yeah.
which most likely I think it will be, where we can go in a few days a week, which I think is just great, right? We can kind of. I used to go in twice a week, and I would adjust my calendar to when I went in and when I was working from home, and schedule a lot of internal meetings, collaboration meetings, when I was in the office, and schedule a lot of my calls while I was at home, and you adapt to it and take advantage of it, and in a good way, in a productive way, rather. So hopefully we'll get to that point sooner than later.
Yeah, I do think you're right. I think like from a cultural standpoint, it's good, but I think you were kind of like ahead of the game when you were doing that like, a few days in and out. So I think like what you did is what everyone's going to be doing. So that's cool because like so many of us, at least on the SMB side, we were always thinking that like sometimes we're like, oh man, we just like one day a week, like it would be nice to just have the option, like if you wanted to, but I think everything's going to shift. Like I think everyone's going to be cool with like the flexibility because we're seeing that we could be just as successful, if not more, right? In terms of like just having more peace of mind and just being able to have a little bit more balance in life.
Yeah, absolutely, and make sure that it doesn't go the other way, even right. That we're not working too long and too many hours at home because it's just a part of the natural, you know, home and flow, right?
Yeah.
And we need to kind of separate it. Too many times where we're working through lunch because there's nothing else to do and it's raining outside or we can't go eat lunch someplace.
Hmm.
So it's trying to find that right balance. But yeah, the flexibility of maybe starting earlier in the day and finishing earlier, or leaving to go to the doctor or pick up your kids from school and coming back to it is, I think, a lot of parents value that. A lot of people value that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I just feel instantly at peace and just more calm just being in your presence. Like I'm like, oh, my blood pressure dropped down like 5 to 10 points just being in your presence. So I could see why, you've had so much success because all your clients are just like, just take my money. Like,
I wish, I wish more failures than successes for sure. But I enjoyed being on here. Appreciate inviting me, and I had a lot of fun. So thanks so much, Davidson.
yeah, I think a lot of people will enjoy this. It's a timely conversation, right? As we, like you said, we're salespeople are working more hours than ever. And then it's also like good to know that, even at your tender age, right, you're still super open-minded to learning new things and like it never stops, right? Because I think sometimes like we all think salespeople think, oh yeah, after I get like 10 years in my belt, like as an AE, like I won't have to learn anymore. It'll be smooth sailing. But from what I'm hearing, it's actually the opposite. Like, nope, you're still learning, you're still growing, like it never ends.
Definitely, yeah, and we want our mind to continue to be engaged and active, and so that goes, another direction with just getting older, and which I'm realizing just with my parents, and so learning and being engaged and active, it's all healthy for sure. That's and good for our careers and our relationships and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Brian, for all that you do for LinkedIn and the learning family. Like you're such a stable and you're always there for people and really really appreciate you. So just wanted to say thank you.
Well, my pleasure, Davidson. Enjoy the last month of bachelorhood and congratulations on your upcoming wedding in a month.
Thank you.
And enjoy every minute of it. It will be one of the best days, if not the best day of your life. So
Oh,
congratulations.
I appreciate that. Okay.
All right, my friend. Thank you again.
Well, that's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and let me know what your thoughts are. If there were any takeaways, I welcome all positive and constructive feedback and hope you enjoy. Stay tuned for more interesting stories and guests. Take care. Take care. Take care.